If I could go back and change one thing about my finances when I started, it would have made me financially free much sooner. And I wouldn't have wasted all those years following the wrong plan. But back then, I didn't know any better. Actually, recently, a young dentist reached out to me and asked me, Jeff, what's one thing that you would do differently with your money if you could start over back when you got out of dental school? I told him exactly what I would have done differently and why it could have saved him decades of financial stress. And today, in this video, I'm going to tell you the exact same strategy. Because if you're on the same path that I used to be, this is going to completely change your financial future. All right, let's get going. I broke this down into the old plan and the new plan. All right, so when I got out of training, I was a huge Dave Ramsey fan. And this was over 20 years ago. Him and Susie Orman were probably the two main, quote, financial gurus back then. And this was really all about that I knew. You know, I listened to his radio show, I'd read his books, that sort of thing. Now, let's break this down. When I got out, I had $300,000 student loan debt from dental school at LSU. And I followed Dave Ramsey's debt snowball. Now, if you don't know what that is, you simply list out all your debts, smallest to largest. You pay the minimum on all the debts, and then you pay as much money as you can each month on that smallest one until it's paid off. Then you take that money, you apply it to the next one on the list, and so on and so forth. All right. Now, this allowed me to pay off the $300,000 student loan in 7.5 years plus the first house. And first house was about $183,000. That's what we paid for it. All right. So 7.5 years, everything was done. All right. And I was following Dave's plan. Now, I was also here's where Dave and I differ. While you're doing the debt snowball, he recommends not investing in anything, not stock market, 401k, anything like that. But I felt that I was disciplined enough and my income was high enough as a periodontist that I could do both. I could still max out the practice's 401k, but also do the debt snowball. So paying aggressively on these loans. Why? Because I didn't want to lose all of those early years compound interest. Okay. So that's what I did. Now, after everything was paid off, I had about $8,500 a month. That was the culmination of the debt snowball. So after all the student loan debts were paid off, and then I got to the point where I was putting all that extra money that I was paying on the student loans on the house, it was about $8,500 a month. Let's call it $100,000 a year. Now, because I didn't know anything different, I was following Dave's path. I was set to, okay, I've paid everything off. I'm going to keep maxing out my 401k because I didn't really know what else to do, invest in. And then I was going to take this extra $8,500 a month and dump it into Vanguard index funds because that is what the 401k was in. So at this point, I was 100% in the stock market. So this is what Dave teaches. He teaches you to live debt free, invest in the stock market, and then you retire after 35 or 40 years. And that's exactly what I was doing. Okay, and that's why I want to label this my old plan. Now, the problem is passive income, because if you follow this plan, which is what the majority of the financial advisors recommend, you have nothing else coming in. You have no passive income, and that can be a problem. I'm going to tell you about that shortly. Now, for the next 7 years, I kept following this plan. I was taking $100,000 and I was investing in these Vanguard index funds. So that was around $700,000 extra in these index funds, plus in the 401k. Okay, now let's get into what happened. So you may have noticed pre-wake-up call. You may be thinking, well, Jeff, what's your wake-up call? Wake-up call is this. I was, 40 years old. So again, I was invested for 7 years, invested $100,000 a year into these index funds. I thought I was doing everything right. But then at one point in my life, everything changed. And that was my wake-up call. And this is what I would have done differently. The wake-up call was I had a ski accident. I was 40 years old. My kids were 8 and 6 years old at the time. I injured my hand while I was skiing, and it suddenly, like all at once, I realized, well, Jeff, if you can't work, you can't earn money as a dentist, as a periodontist. Number two, Jeff, your investments are 100% locked up in the stock market. Majority of it was in a 401k I can't touch until I'm 60. And then if I wanted to get into these Vanguard index funds, well, how do you get money out of mutual funds? You have to do what? You have to sell them. You're going to be drawing down on what you're trying to build. So not only are you drawing down on that, but you're also what? You're taxed as well. To me, all of this was off limits till I was like 65 or 70. That was the path that I was on. All right. And the thing is, I had no passive income coming in to support my family if I couldn't use my hands. I had spent years following a plan that gave me zero financial flexibility. Are you on the same plan too? Probably so. This is why I'm giving you this information. I want to let you know what I used to do and what I'm doing now. And again, remember that original question that Dennis asked me and said, if you could have changed one thing, what would have done differently? All right. I would have built a retirement plan. I had built a retirement plan, but what I would have done differently, I would have not have just built a retirement plan. I would have built a freedom plan. And because I didn't do that back then, that was a huge mistake. Okay. So if I could have gone back to his original question, Jeff, you can go back when you got out of dental school, what would you done differently? Let's get into that. We're going to call this the new plan, what I've done differently. And I'm glad that I had Dave Ramsey because he, like if you want to go build a house or a building or something, you have to start off with a solid foundation. And that's what Dave does. He gives you a solid foundation. Now you have to look at his audience. His audience is a majority of Americans who are really bad with money and they're broke. They don't make much money. And that's just a good foundation to get on. I would have still paid off the consumer debt. But I would, now that I know the time value of money, which I didn't know back then because I was young, now that I'm older, I would not have paid off the house initially. Okay. I've got another video about 15-year mortgage versus a 30-year mortgage and why I think the 30-year is better. Again, it may not be right for you, but it's right for me. But I'm just telling you what I would have done differently. So I would have still paid off the 300 grand student loan, except for the house. I would have still kept maxing out the 401k because I don't want all my eggs in one basket. I don't want it all in the stock market. I don't want it all in real estate or businesses or other thing, crypto or whatever. I want to have some diversification. All right. But remember, if you're on the old plan, the 401k, the stock market, that's your only plan. That's your only focus. So here is what the change would have been. That one change. Jeff, what would you have done differently? I would have started so I would have taken that $8,500 a month and I would have started taking that excess money and putting it into cash flowing real estate, into different businesses, things that cash flow. So again, instead of dumping all that extra money into index funds, I would have invested, because my 401k was in index funds, I would have invested in these different things. My favorite thing is real estate syndication. That's a hands-off way to invest in real estate. All right. Let's take a look at what that would have looked like. Remember over here, $100,000 a year. So over 7 years, $700,000. I could have taken that, and the majority of the real estate syndications that I invest in, they have what's called an 8% preferred return. So that's paying you 8%. Typically it's more, can be more if the profit's higher, but I just want to give you just nice round averages. All right. 8% preferred return on, so that would be every time you invest $100,000, you're getting roughly 8% a year, which is going to be $8,000. All right, $8,000 times 7 years. That's where we get this $56,000 in passive income. Now, the majority of these syndications that I'm in, they turn over or they sell, like if it's a mobile home park or an RV park, a self-storage, something like that, 5 to 7 years. So I'm not even taking into account. So if I invested in year one, then let's say 5 or 6 years later, that doubles. So that 100 grand turns into 200 grand. I'm not even taking to that account about that happening. I'm just doing it. Hey, none of these things sell. We're just going to get the 8%. All right. That's where I'm coming up with the $56,000. But again, more realistically, the reinvestment, when one sells, you reinvest that back in, kind of like you're doing a 401k, you're reinvesting your dividends. It would have been anywhere from conservatively $80,000 to more $100,000 a year. So over here, at this point right here, I had a maxed out 401k every year, and I had $700,000 extra in Vanguard mutual funds. Over here, I'd have still had the $400,000 maxed out, but instead of this being in the stock market, this extra money would have been in creating passive income, anywhere from roughly $80,000 to $100,000. You could call it tax-free. It's more tax deferred, but you're really not paying any taxes on it because you're using depreciation. Those are passive losses you get. The IRS allows you to write off the wear and tear of a property against the income from that property. And as long as you keep accumulating depreciation each year, you're able to write off that passive income. Passive losses offset passive income. I'm not an accountant. Check with yours. Don't take this as tax or investment advice. All right. So the main big difference is this. It's the passive income you're getting, the passive cash flow. Now, remember, I had that accident. If I was sitting there and I was getting $80,000 to $100,000 a year coming in passively, well, I wouldn't have been so worried about hurting my hands if I would have been on this path. So the result on this path is this. So here's the result that you can get versus the old plan. You can get to the point much quicker than 65 or 70 years old that work is optional. You can have early retirement if you want to. Whatever you want to call it, financial freedom. You can work part-time. You can completely retire. You can change careers if you want to. My point being is this plan gives you options. This one doesn't. So imagine this. If you had an extra $80,000 to $100,000 coming in passive income right now, what would you do? Would you go from, like me, full-time to part-time? Would you travel more, spend more time with family, completely retire, or retire early? What would you do? So if you are listening to this and watching this, and you're only following the old plan, the stock market plan, and you think that that's the only way to build wealth, then I highly encourage you to start right here. Start to shift your thinking. Start to shift your strategy. Okay. I do want you to keep, especially if your employer or if you're self-employed, getting that match. So if your employer is giving you the match, of course, keep maxing out the 401k. Even if you're self-employed, I do recommend that you do this because again, you're being diversified. So this, to me, this money I'm probably never even going to touch. This could build generational wealth, but if you need it, it's going to be there when you get into your 60s and 70s. All right. So keep maxing out that 401k. But again, start investing in things like real estate syndications or businesses that produce cash flow, okay? That pay you now rather than later. And you want to have something that's going to give you an option. This plan to give you option. And this plan is going to give you an option to go to work because you want to, not because you have to, which is like most people. Now, if you want to learn more about how to build true financial freedom using, again, my favorite type of real estate investment, real estate syndications, do yourself a big favor, check out this next video.